Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's the end of the day. We're almost done here, so we'll have some cocktails shortly. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about crafting digital worlds and the links we go to scan and replicate objects and locations in the real world. My name is Erick Geisler, and I am the CTO of Global Objects, and I'm going to take you through a little journey of creating digital twins. So we're Global Objects. We have the mission of digitizing the world. Our mission is to create the most highest fidelity digital replicas of real things. We've been in business about 1.5 years now, and we've been primarily in R&D over the past 1.5 years, and we're just starting to come to market with our products. Joining me is Nolan and Ryan. They head up our scanning department. And we travel the world together, capturing artifacts from place to place and learning along the way how to get the highest fidelity and the highest quality. That's a little bit about me. My background is primarily visual effects, so a lot of people in this industry come from a visual effects background. I grew up in the visual effects industry from its inception in the computer-generated world. I started in photochemical and then transitioned to digital. All right, so what do we make digital twins for? Let's talk about it. Digital twins work for entertainment, simulation, artificial intelligence, real estate, aerospace, government, manufacturing, all kinds of different verticals. But the toughest one is media and entertainment because it's the most discerning eye, right? So if we can crack photoreal CG, we can pretty much work in any industry that needs 3D content. And photoreal 3D has been the golden dragon all of us CG guys have been chasing for our entire life because it's so difficult to do. There's a lot of disciplines that sort of have to come together. I don't know if you guys were at Ed's talk earlier this morning. There's this uncanny valley, right? It's a point where things don't look real, and the amount of effort it takes to get them to just, squeak up to the realism is taking lots of time and energy and money. So we're always looking for ways to optimize and make it easier. All right, we're based here in Los Angeles. We have a studio in North Hollywood. We have a smaller stage like this for testing as well as scanning facilities and everything else. And we're going to talk a little bit about what our services are. So before we get into it and into the demo, so we have a capture department. We have what's called Go Deep, which is our deep learning. And that's where we're really investigating the use of 3D in machine learning. Right now, most machine learning has been trained on two-dimensional images, and we think it needs to be trained on three-dimensional images to properly sort of understand the world. We have Go Vault, which is a secure place for our clients to store their 3D information, and then we have Control, which is a way to manipulate and view and look at all of that information. All right, so what is a digital twin? It's basically a really accurate, high-definition model that replicates something that exists in the real world, right? And that's really what a digital twin is. It is a one-to-one approximation in a computer simulation, essentially, of something that exists in the real world. All right, so why? Why do you need a digital twin? Well, you have many use cases for it and how it monetizes and how it works across the industries. But simulation is one use case, media and entertainment's another use case. Products, like if you're shopping for something online and you want to see something more than just a photograph, you want to spin something around or look at it, that's a use case for a digital twin. There are companies that want to simulate on a large scale things like theme parks and other types of industries that want to simulate things like warehouses. All of that requires a digital twin. All right, so our workflow is we go on set, we scan, we ingest the data, we clean it up, and then we store it, and then we can use that data for AI training. All right, let's talk about capture. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. So we capture aerially, terrestrially on the ground, small scale and large scale. So our capturing occurs throughout everything from a small prop to a large 1 mile by 1 mile radius building, for example. And we do that with a number of different methodologies that we're going to start to talk about. All right, let's talk about this crazy workflow here. So you can see there's a lot of different capture technologies, right? We're employing everything from aerial platforms to photography platforms to laser scanning platforms. And the reason why there's so many different kinds is because each one is really good at the thing that it does. I'll give you an example. Photogrammetry, right? Everybody knows about photogrammetry. You take a bunch of pictures and you do a solve and you end up with a 3D model. It's really good for certain things, but it's not as accurate as a laser scan, for example. So laser scanning is really good for the surface of an object, right? It's really good to get what does that object look like. It's not necessarily good for color or texture. So Ryan, why don't we, Ryan heads up laser scanning. Let's talk a little bit about laser scanning. We're going to show you a laser scan live so you get an idea of how it works.
Sure. So yeah, like Eric was talking about, one of the steps is getting the shape of the model, where photogrammetry lacks and where it really lacks sometimes for more complicated models where we can still get the photos, but the model is garbage. We can use metrology-grade laser scanners like this blue laser scanner here with an accuracy of 0.02 millimeters with a resolution of 0.2 millimeters. And I'll be able to scan this entire shoe in less than 10 minutes. If you really want to see the full one, I can do it over at the booth later.
We can go quicker.
It's a very simple process.
Yeah, so we start out with tracking markers, and those tracking markers help the computer know where the laser scanner is moving. And first he'll scan the tracking markers, and then he'll tell the computer, okay.
Yeah.
And so now we're rapidly acquiring very high resolution mesh data in real time, down to where you can see laces and the shape of the fabric, the stitching. These are all things that are really important when you're trying to replicate an object. And it's a slow process. There's multiple laser lines in a grid pattern. It's a certain frequency of a blue laser. It actually works really well with reflective surfaces. So we can capture a lot of reflective detail. You've got some experience with that.
Yeah, so basically what I head up at Global Objects is more of the photogrammetry photometrics department, so the actual imaging. So if anyone has done photogrammetry or photometrics knows, reflective surfaces or pure black surfaces are a complete no-go on our end, which is what Ryan was referencing when he said it generates such a bad model. So by using the blue laser for our base model for the objects that we scan, we are able to get we did like coffee. The word eludes me, but the like a basic coffee brewing machine from a cafe.
A carafe, or you mean like the coffee? Yeah, so it's like clear. Essentially, it's see-through. We actually do have a trick. Sometimes the blue laser also fails us on highly reflective or highly see-through surfaces. So we use a special spray that completely evaporates, right? And so we'll spray this a little bit onto a surface to give us a little bit of a dull. It's like dulling spray if you've ever been on a set. But this dulling spray evaporates completely. Funny note, we were in the UK scanning a bunch of props on a set. And the props master was very nervous about giving us this particular prop. And we're like, no worries. This stuff evaporates. And he's like, this is incredible. And it was so cold that it was taking extra long to evaporate. And he didn't actually believe us until the sun came out, and then the thing evaporated. And then he was like, okay, I trust you guys now. But it's like a dulling spray, and it'll evaporate. The point is that we take extra detail care at every step. So like acquiring a mesh, really important because it's definitely more accurate than photogrammetry, right? Because we're getting a lot more detail. And then we take these steps, and there you go. Ryan scanned a shoe for you. And then we take it to the next step. And this is where Nolan sort of comes into play here, which is, let me just go by here a couple times. Yeah, photogrammetry and photometric stereo. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of our in terms of our texturing for all of our objects, we use photometric stereo. So basically on average, for a small object, something like the shoe, I take about 4,000 to 7,000 images. That's with a light rig we've built with cross-polarized and non-cross-polarized lenses. And we are able to get the light position data from that programmed into our system so that we can generate accurate PBR shaders. And that's all without artist intervention. That's in our software. We can actually generate that so that when it's applied to the texture of the model that Ryan scanned, you get the kind of, as Eric was saying, the best of both worlds. You get a millimeter accurate shoe combined with the correct roughness and reflectivity, and you get a tangent normal and everything. And I'm a big shoe guy, so that's sort of some of the Amazon pictures you'll see later were from my own edification and research. But even for stuff like shoes, where when you scan something like the hookah shoe, you can see, obviously the word itself is a little reflective. It has kind of a plastic finish on it, whereas the strings in it still have a little bit of reflectivity. They're still made from like microfibers and plastics, but they're not as reflective. And I know probably most of you guys know what I'm talking about. But by using photometric stereo as opposed to normal photogrammetry or hand texturing, we're able to get the actual light data in relation to the actual object.
Yeah, like if there's a flaw on an object, we'll pick up that flaw, right? That's sometimes is a problem for product photography because they're trying to omit flaws. But on something like a prop where like a dent or a nick is really important, we will actually be capturing those dents and nicks as they occur. So photoreal 3D is important, right? And that's the standard that we hold everything towards. So you can see here a 3D render versus the same angle with 35 millimeter photography. So that's what we're really looking for. And we're looking for at extremely high resolution, extremely detailed. And we're using lenses and cameras that are not necessarily conventional. Most of our cameras can be medium format cameras, which are 100 megapixels. We're taking thousands of photographs, right? Just for one object. And we're really trying to squeeze every ounce, all the horsepower out of each step of the line, because every step matters, right? At each step, if you lose fidelity, right, the sum total of all those steps will be a loss of fidelity. So we're really like pushing the boundaries as much as we can at each of those steps to maintain fidelity throughout the process. And then at the end, you end up with something that is very faithfully representing the object itself, down to the stitch details, down to the paint, down to the way the paint reflects with light. And all this is really important. And you end up with a shader that has all of those qualities in individual layers, and that's called the PBR material. And this is really important to sort of maintain the integrity of the object down to all of its even flaws, for example. And we can do this on larger scale objects as well. And so it's really important to be able to, especially if you get into like product photography or visual effects or anything, that you can feel like the ripstop nylon versus the zipper, for example. The zipper is a metallic surface, right? So we really are caring about what's metal, what's not metal, right? Dielectric versus not, and how all of these things come together to make an asset or an artifact that looks really good. And so that's why we take thousands and tens of thousands of photographs every single day and align those with laser scan data and everything else to put these all together. And so here's some example. So go ahead.
Yeah, so Amazon recently has rolled out, if you guys ever use the Amazon mobile app, you'll see that most of their stuff has view in 3D now. So this is two features. One is their AR feature, which I'm not going to talk about. And their second one, especially for furniture and clothing, is this image that you can see on the left, which is kind of a photogrammetry or basic 3D model of the product. So just from experience, this would take, a modeler would model it, texture it, do the whole process. And roughly in the same amount of time, we're able to actually just capture the shoe. Now that's just my shoe. I took it off my foot one day. And you can see in the future slides, you can see the up close detail just on the base level, the difference in detail and texture. So
you feel the leather, right? You feel the suede. You feel the nylon. That's the important differentiation, right? Because if you're looking at a product on a website, you really want to know how it looks and feels, just like your eyes would in the real world. And so those are the types of things that we're trying to replicate. All right, now let's talk about scapes. So our scapes are an answer to a problem in virtual production, media entertainment. A lot of people, the adoption of these virtual walls and everything like that has been really tough because of the amount of work it takes to get environments up and running. And so since we're at that point of, okay, we know what it takes to put together these assets, we want to start doing this on a larger scale, and that's what Scapes is. So Scapes are where we take real-world locations. This is a real diner. It's in downtown Los Angeles, and we do, and I think you've seen, if you were here yesterday, you saw some shots on the diner, and we do a digital replication of it, so we have a one-to-one version, right? And what we're doing is we're scanning, we're using photometrics, we're using laser scanning, we're using LiDAR tools, all of that coming together into a data set that can work inside of a DCC, it can work inside of Unreal Engine, and then it can work on a wall. And the props in the foreground and the props of the background match, the tables match, everything is a one-to-one relationship. And so we're going to be putting these scapes together into library packs so that people can use those scapes inside of their productions. Because it takes a lot, it takes sometimes 6 figures to get a environment that looks right for virtual production. So the more we can put these together, the more we can democratize it, the better it is. So there's Nolan and Jess. They're sitting there, and you can see, we'll turn the wall off, and you can see what's real and what's not real. And so by blending those things together, having the actual prop that somebody sat in be the thing that we scanned, when you start to mix and match those things on a virtual production environment, it really seamlessly helps sell the whole story, right? And to have those things readily available are what we're doing with Scapes. Now we go out with laser scanners, we go out with terrestrial, aerial platforms, we go scan these Scapes, and we're actively building a library of these things for use for media and entertainment. And that's all going to be part of our marketplace, which is going to be one of our first product offerings, and that's coming first quarter 2025. Okay, now let's talk about scanning. There's only a few of us here, right? We're not going to be able to scan everything. So we started looking at AI training, right? The problem is, we don't need to scan every single donut. We just need to scan enough donuts to know how to train a computer to make donuts, right? That's really what we're after. We want to know what's a good sample size. We want to sample enough data to be able to say, okay, we've sampled, we know how many donuts we need. Now we can make sprinkled donuts. Now we can make sugar-coated donuts. It's that sampling that's really important, right? And so we're taking our scapes and fusing it with Gen AI and using those scapes as a control net. So if you're familiar, you want to be able to constrain what the 3D is doing. So using the scapes, we can then take it, feed it into a control net and say, okay, let's try a diner, great. And then you can go and make some camera decisions and feed it. And because we know what all these objects are, they're already segmented from the point cloud, from our cleanup, from the Unreal side, we can start to generate a regular diner, or we can generate a steampunk diner, or we can generate a goth diner. And it really opens up the flexibility for filmmakers or for the users of the content so that there isn't such a technical lift, right? The heavy lift that there is for somebody to get their vision across. Usually you have to work with a lot of technicians and it's a hard process. So at Global Objects, we're trying to make the process easier for creatives. We're trying to make it more interesting. We're trying to make it simpler for people to achieve. So another interesting thing that I would like to talk with you guys about. So Ryan, tell us what, because you handle a lot of the laser scanning, a lot of the environment scanning. What do you think, how long does it take to capture something like a building, for example, the exterior?
Gotcha. If it's like exterior and we're doing laser scanning, we use like a Geosystems over at Global Objects. We love them. We love their gear. They can shoot LiDAR as far as like 40 meters, giving like centimeter accuracy within millimeter for like 10 meter, 20 meter. we really like them. So for something like, say, the interior of this building, it might take me hour or two to get enough coverage for the stage and the surroundings and get an accurate model. And then additionally, to do some photogrammetry to get really good textures around the place, that might be somebody else on site. So you can scan this entire area less than a day. In terms of like exteriors or otherwise, all of the, it's all possible with the systems that we have today.
All right. So we went on such a scanning expedition recently. We scanned, there was a interior of a gym that they shoot a lot of like Nike commercials and things at. And we did a scan of that gym. We brought it into to Unreal Engine. We cleaned it all up. And we have it available. So Patricio, if you could flip over to that. You're going to see a live demo of one of our escapes on this wall. And this was like I said, it was a gym, and it's a one-to-one replica of what the gym was. And it's coming, hopefully. It's going to take probably about 5 seconds to flip over. So in the meantime, we'll talk about basically the time to acquire this stuff isn't very long. You can acquire the data fairly rapidly, right? There we go. And so are we tracking? Is it tracking? Looks like we are. We have a camera frustum. And so we're tracking to that Stipe jib right there. And can you turn the camera sideways? Yeah, there we go. Okay, all right. Back to presentation. So the time to acquire these things aren't very long. They are, within a few hours to capture, and props are about the same. What is it? How long does it take you to scan like a shoe, for example?
Oh, the shoe, it's like 10 minutes to scan and then maybe 20 minutes to export it.
Okay, good. And what about on the photometric side?
On the photometric side, it's probably about 45 minutes, but most of my process at this point is automated for capture. So for Nolan time, it's about 5 minutes of Nolan hits some buttons, and then I do processing after.
Right, and versus the amount of time it used to take for artists to have to go through and manually texture these things. That's the thing, we're trying to reduce artist time so that the amount of time it takes to create an object is far less. I think we're going to open it up to questions. Yeah, so let's open it up to questions.
Do you mind restarting?
Yeah, could you repeat the question?
Certainly, I'm sorry. Say if you're scanning a small object like a model, say a model biplane, how do you deal with the fact that the top wing will occlude things beneath it? How do you get around that?
Yeah, so the way we deal with occlusion is by capturing from more angles, right? You want to capture as much detail around everything as you possibly can. That's the way to handle occlusion.
Yeah, in terms of your example was a biplane, like nice and big sort of like object. We also have aerial LiDAR as well, so we can combine like top, down, all that sort of stuff. If you're talking about like small scale and like going inside of it, if it's like can come apart in pieces, it's always easier to like take it apart and then we can have artists just put it back together.
Yeah, Patricia, could you go back to the other view? I'll show you another.
Sorry, just to understand your question, you mean like a small little toy model biplane, correct?
Yeah, so something about 8 to 10 inches.
Yeah, totally.
But
So
highly detailed.
for that on my end, for the photogrammetry, one, I'd make sure I'd accurately set the angle of my loops correctly. So I'd go, okay, I know that if I set this at, let's say, a 15-degree angle before I do the loop, okay, that is an angle that I know I'll get the inside of the wing. Then I can do some depth of field masking. So then I just have the computer run my depth of field algorithm. So it goes, okay, everything that's slightly out of focus, where the pixels are out of focus, get that out of this batch of processing so I can focus on the bottom wing of the plane. And then when we compile that back together, it means that the out of focus bits aren't affecting my processing for my photometrics, so I get accurate light data all across.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, there's about 132 camera positions to capture a shoe. So you're really looking at it from every single possible angle that you can. And if you take it, you look on the front of it like a clock, you're measuring about 32 positions, and then you're raising the camera up on the other angle. And so you do that about 4 different times. That's about 130 to 128 camera positions, roughly. And that will give you all of the basic undercuts and everything you need to fight occlusion. Now, but we're only fighting occlusion to capture the texture data. When he's actually scanning it, he fights occlusion by going underneath, and he can see the data coming in real time, and so he can make decisions and where he has to adjust the angle. Any other questions?
How small can you get?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, can you get down to like something the size of a pinky nail?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. And we have to employ a technique in photography called focus stacking, right? So we have to actually go in and take multiple pictures at multiple focal lengths to be able to approximate a sharp image, right? And you can get down to an ant-sized thing. But it's tough, right? Because now you've just multiplied that 4,000 pictures times however many pictures you need for the stack, and now your data size gets pretty deep. There are some newer methodologies and some papers that I've been looking at that are exploring ways of doing microscopic things, right? And that's using some UV wavelengths of light, combined with some camera techniques, but that's all very experimental at this point. Any other questions?
This is great. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the product that's coming 2025, about the
Yeah.
library. Maybe in terms of pricing, if you already have one, or what the idea is once you download the objects, who owns it? If you're in a studio environment, how do you go by using it by multiple artists and that stuff?
Yeah, sure. So we're working on our licensing model right now. We are actively surveying artists and people to see what sort of thing that they want. Generally speaking, those are tough questions. These are really expensive to produce, right? So we want to monetize them, but we also want to make it so it's easy for people to have access to. So you sort of have to, when you're running this as a business, you get to figure out, okay, I need to make money from this, but I also need to make it easy for people to access it. And we don't have a pricing model yet, 100%. We have ideas and inklings on where it should go, but we are surveying our audiences right now to see what the market will bear and what's fair for everybody.
We're also speaking to a firm about tracking the object and different ways that we can do that. Eric, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that's going to happen with this library is eventually, so on this journey, we learned that 3D objects that are sourced from reality is kind of rare. It doesn't really, there's not a lot of that data, right? There's a lot of 3D data. You can go on TurboSquid or CG Trader. There's a ton of things that are made, but things that actually have provenance to something in the real world doesn't really exist. There's not a lot of it readily available. And that becomes really important for training, right, for machine learning, because machines need to learn about 3D. And so we're going to be offering a training set of data as well for future algorithms to train on, because we think it's going to be really important. And it goes back to the donut, right? If we've captured enough of a sample size of a sprinkled donut, right? Conceivably, AI should be able to create photorealistic sprinkled donuts based on a sample size that's large enough. And that's really where I think that will offset sort of the pricing model of getting assets in people's hands at an affordable price that isn't going to be too expensive, to make sense. And then in terms of provenance tracking, it's really important, because when you start to talk about AI and training data, everybody's, at the studio level, everybody's like, oh, hey, let's talk about AI, because the problem is the training that's been done to date, it's hard to source. Where's that material coming from? Do we have clearances for it? Where are the rights? Are the rights holders, who are the rights holders in all of this? And so that's why we're working on a tracking system to be able to sort of track that and understand where this object came from. What are the rights associated with it? All this stuff is really important. It's stuff that we're thinking about. Any other questions?
Oh, one over here?
Over here.
All right, I'm coming.
Can you use this technology in any other industries like manufacturing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because the quality is so high, you can replicate. Like if we were to scan car parts, you could print car parts or create car parts.
Some of this technology, like this blue laser scanner over here, it was basically designed for that as well.
Yeah, it's metrology grade, which means you can replicate from it because of the accuracy.
And in terms of manufacturing, in terms on the texture side, as opposed to just the actual printing and manufacturing itself, you are able to actually look at flaws. So then it's a better way to actually be able to train people and say, hey, when you see a part like this with this stress fracture or this amount of wear and tear, this is something that needs to be pulled from the line. This needs something that needs to be pulled from service. And then you can use that as a training asset.
Any other questions?
One more. When you're done creating your 3D object, can, say, a CG artist go in and manipulate it and add moving parts to it? Is that something readily accomplished?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the objects themselves have been cleaned up, right? And in cleaning it, we basically made it so that somebody could manipulate it or add a rig to it or do all the things that you would do down the CG pipeline ahead of it. We haven't really rigged anything or created anything for animation. We leave that to whoever's going to use it, right? Because they have different pipelines and different tools that they use. But we will make it so that it looks good and will react correctly in any DCC or Unreal Engine or anything that they need. Because we're capturing a lot of data, right? This all starts with a massive amount of data, and it all gets squeezed down into something that'll work really well in real time. And then that is the thing that we'll pass on to the next part. Any other questions? Oh, there's one.
So let's say you wanted to scan a New York street or something like that. Do you guys have tools or technology so you wouldn't necessarily have to lock it all down? You could just scan it and capture it with people walking around and living their lives?
Yeah, everything we scan is mostly not locked down. So what happens is that's part of the cleaning data, right? So when we scan a street, for example, we'll go in and all of our different scan points, and we'll have to go in and find out that there's AI tools that'll look at a point cloud data set and go, oh, these are people, these are things that are moving, right? This wasn't consistent from this scan and this scan. And so it helps us clean all that data out. You can take out things like cars, you can take out things like trees. So you make a decision what data to keep or remove. Because it's 3D, you can remove it from that. Like it's kind of like Photoshop, but for 3D. You can say, let's just get rid of this, and away it goes. And you fill it in with neighboring data. So if something was touching or occluding something, you can take all the neighboring data and say, best guess of what this was.
And for something like a New York City street, the fact I grew up and lived in New York, where we're all very fast walkers, that's actually better for LiDAR scans, because then when you're booking it down Fifth Ave, my laser scan won't get you stopped. So it's much easier to clean out that data, and it's much easier to have these AI programs that we run actually pull that out, because it's very little information as opposed to a full modeled body.
Any other questions?
Erick, why don't you let the video file run while we're asking the next questions?
Which video file?
The video file on your slide.
I think the
Here you go.
basketball. Are you talking about
The basketball one? I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm sorry.
Hey, in terms of the fashion objects that you showed that you can manipulate and change,
Yes.
is the software only as good as the technician working on it, like Nola, or is that your name?
Nolan.
Nolan. I can't see the end. Sorry.
No worries.
Or is this environment something that a production could use to, say, allow the design team, costume team, etc., use, and they themselves manipulate it before it goes into any sort of real environment afterwards?
Great question. So the goal is minimal artist intervention, right? So the quality of this is not dictated by the skill level of the technician involved. And so the whole pipeline that we've built is based on that, right? We don't want to have this one person is the only person in the world that knows how to make this look right. And that's why the methodologies that we're using are to minimal artist intervention. Our artists the only time they spend really are like setting up what are called UVs, which are ways that texture maps wrap around things. We optimize those because right now there's not really a great amount of tools for really optimal UVs, so we optimize those and make some decisions. But aside from that, the creative, like this is a bump and a rip, and this is shiny and this is dull, that's all being part of the capture process. And the goal is a set's a set, a prop's a prop, a light's a light. Let's, now that we can interact with these things in real time, right? And there's tools that'll ray trace things in real time and all kinds of wonderful things that are happening. Now you can give that power that used to be a couple of kids eating Hot Pockets till 4 a.m. drinking Red Bulls, and only those two guys knew how to do it, to the props person or the sets person. So that's the goal. The goal is that anybody in a production can utilize 3D data. Any other questions?
All right. Round of applause for Global Objects.